Hey everyone, welcome to Profoto's webinar. My name is Jared Platt. You might have noticed that I look a little bit different than Mark Wallace. So I am now taking over Mark's duties here to teach you about lighting with the Profoto gear. Mark is going to be traveling the world here very, very soon. And so you can find Mark Wallace at spontaneousworld.com. So spontaneousworld.com. Follow what he's doing. He'll be blogging constantly about what he's doing and traveling the world. So it should be interesting to see. If Mark's out there, good luck with all your travels, and we hope to hear from you soon. We are going to kind of change up the webinar's basic the way it runs a little bit, because I am not a studio photography. I mean, I do a little studio photography work, but I am more of a wedding and portrait photographer here in Arizona, and I am mostly outside of the studio, which is why an off-camera flash like the B1 is so useful, because I'm always on location and I never have power available to me. So that's why I am going to be changing up the webinar a little bit. So what you'll notice today is that we're going to be going on location with some video, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little Q&A, and we will show you some of the things that I was working on, do a little close-up stuff, all that kind of stuff. If you have questions, please make sure that you are putting them into the chat window, which is just to the right of this video. So we will be taking your questions, and we will be answering as many as we possibly can in the time that we have. To find out more about the Profoto light shaping tools, as well as the B1 head, you can go to profoto.com/B1 and also profoto.com/products. So those are the two places you can go to get a little bit more information about the tools themselves. And of course, feel free to ask questions as we are here online, live. Well, first off, let me tell you a little bit about me. I am a wedding and portrait photographer. I've been in Arizona my whole life, and we have very harsh light here in Arizona. So to start off, I thought it would be interesting to take us out to the worst lighting conditions we could find, which was pretty much about 2 p.m. in the deserts of Arizona. And so that's where we're going to go. But before we go to the first video and start talking about what we did, I wanted to introduce you to the equipment that we're going to be using throughout the videos and throughout our live webinar here. So the first thing that we used was, I'm using a Canon Mark III. Various lenses throughout the photo shoot. I just happen to have a 50 on here now. But the Canon Mark III is what I'm using for photographing. It's a great camera, so that's what we're using. The other thing you'll notice that we use occasionally throughout the shoot is a neutral density filter. So if we could get a zoom in on that, you can see the neutral density is going to cut the light down. This is extremely useful when we're out in super bright light and we want to get nice wide open apertures. Because if we open our aperture wide enough in the bright sunlight, then we have to go to 1/8,000th of a second. And once we're at 1/8,000th of a second, then we obviously are well above the flash sync speed and we can't use the flash. So neutral density filters are really, really useful. I would get one for each lens. They make some with step rings that you can, get a bigger one and then step down. But once you start doing that, then your lens shades don't actually fit on your camera anymore, which these are extremely, extremely useful. It's interesting how many people I see that have a lens shade, but they don't use it. They just go like this. And I can't get behind that movement. I need to protect the lens from the sun, and so I'm always using a lens shade. I also find it really odd when people shoot with their lens shade like this. That makes no sense to me. So anyway, I always have a lens shade, and so I have a neutral density for each size of lens that I have. So I have 3 neutral density filters that I use, and so that allows me to keep using my lens hood. Also, we are using the Profoto B1, which is sitting right here next to me. So this is the B1 head. The battery is completely self-contained right inside the unit. It's very, very light, charges in about an hour, and even has a little self-check light on it so you can see if it's full. And it just easily clips on to the actual head itself. And then, of course, the controls are here in the back. Fairly light system, easy to port around, and usually we just stick it on a monopod when we're out in the field so that the assistant can quickly move it around. If I'm out there by myself, then I'm going to use obviously a stand and then a sandbag of some sort. So we're using the B1 head, but in addition to the B1 head, we're using the air remote. This is the TTL air remote, and that allows me to control all of my B1 heads from the camera, both TTL and manual. So that's also what we're using. We're also going to be using, throughout this webinar, a few different light modifiers. So the first light modifier is the Softbox. So this is an RFI 2x3 softbox. So it's a decent sized soft, it's not huge. I love a huge softbox, but when you're out on location and the wind is whipping around and you're at the edge of a cliff, this is a much better thing to deal with, so it's not like a sail and blowing you off the cliff. We will use a beauty dish, which is smaller, but still gives us a nice soft light source, spreads the light a little bit bigger than just a bare head. And then we're going to use the telezoom, and this is for throwing the light a long distance. So it really magnifies the light with inside of that reflector, and then it sends it quite a long distance away. Obviously it's smaller, so you can see we've got bigger, we've got mid-size, we've got small. So we're going to kind of use all 3 of these throughout our webinar. And then of course you have the ability to go even smaller if you want to be a little bit more portable and use just a regular zoom head. And then we may get around to, if we have time, we may get around to using our translucent umbrella. We'll see if we have time for that video, and if not, we'll do it another time. So these are the things that we're going to be using today, but before we get started using these, I wanted to discuss basic light strategies when I walk into any given situation. And so we're going to do that with our little whiteboard here. And if you zoom in here, you notice that I'm shooting, we're going from the very top looking down on our lighting situation. And I've got this awesome looking, this is what I look like from the top because I have no hair. So if we have someone like me in the shot, and then here's my camera, whenever I come into any given light situation, I want the largest light source to be the main light source that's lighting my face, because that's going to give me the most pleasing light. So when you look at any light source, the worst light source is going to be the sun, or the smallest light source. The quality of your light is all based on the size of the light in relationship to whatever it is you're shooting. So if you're looking at the sun is going to be a very small light source. And in comparison to all of these light sources that I have here, so here's the softbox, and then this little pin light is about the size of the sun. So if you're looking at me next to this softbox, this is a very large light source, and the sun, which looks about this size in comparison, is a very small light source. So the sun is always going to create harsh shadows, whereas the softbox is always going to create did I say that right? The sun is going to create harsh shadows, and the softbox is going to create very soft shadows because it's kind of sending light from multiple places at the same time then those light sources can reach around your nose or your ears or your neck or whatever, and so then you're filling in, basically a large light source fills in its own shadows, whereas the sun, as a small light source, only has a very, very small area of light being projected out, and so it can't fill in its own shadow. That's the basic idea behind size as it relates to the quality of light. So, that being understood then, if I come into any given situation, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my subject and turn them away from the sun. So I'm going to put my sun behind them. And I'm never going to put it right behind them, because then it'll like be at the back of their head and it'll be shining into my lens. And so I'll put the sun off to either the right or the left shoulder so that I can shoot. The sun is going to be striking my lens shade instead of my lens, and it's going to generally create a crest of light here, crest of light here. You might see some light over here. You might see a little light, there. You'll typically see a little bit of light on their shoulder, but all that's coming from the sun, which is that really, really harsh light source. So the sun always goes behind, and that basically allows me to have a really nice hair light anywhere I happen to be. Now, this changes a lot when you are in Seattle and it's covered with, clouds or fog or whatever. Then suddenly you have soft light pretty much everywhere, and then it's just a matter of filling in a little bit of shadows under the eyes and things like that. But in our case, because we were in open sun almost all the time, we have to learn to deal with it. So we put the sun behind, and that puts the person's face in their own shadow so that they're completely shadowed. And then what happens is, just naturally, your light source for the front of the person's face is the entire sky behind you. So you have a very, very large softbox in the northern sky, and then you've got the sun kind of traversing the southern sky. At least that's the way it is here in Phoenix. Of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere, that kind of changes a little bit, but just directionally. If it's sunset or sunrise, then it's the east and west sky that you're looking at. One of the east sky, if the sun's in the east sky, then that's where your hair light is coming from. And then if you face your model to the west sky, then the west is your softbox. And so just normally, without any kind of help, this is the situation that I want to create originally. When I first come into a circumstance, get the sun behind them and use the other side of the sky as my main light source, which is going to be the big softbox. And so that gives me that really nice lighting condition to start with. Now I have to augment it, generally speaking, after that, especially considering that this is so bright. But the first thing that you have to do if you're going to accomplish this scenario is that you have to do a little location scouting first. So if we go to the computer, you're going to see a map here inside of Lightroom, and this is a location scout. So when I want to do any kind of a photo shoot, I always do a location scout first, and you can see that this is the Phoenix area, and off here in the mountains is where we're going to end up going. So this is our location scout. You can see there's a road that goes out here. It's called the Apache Trail, and I just kind of traverse out here by the lakes, and then I keep moving, and then I go up, and then I finally get way up here into these canyons. And all of this is just GPS location data on my phone that's giving me where these images are. And so if in Lightroom, if I click on one of these, then it shows me, okay, you took 17 images in this general location. So let me show you a quick location scout, just so you get a sense of what I'm thinking when I'm location scouting. So the first thing I do is I see an area that has some interesting stuff to it. So I'm going to click on one of these and show it to you. So I've got these interesting rock formations happening here. I've got some interesting, kind of surface of the moon stuff happening here. So I'm thinking these would be really cool places. The problem is I know that I have to face my model away from the sun, because we want to follow the mentality that we had before on the putting the sun behind the person's back and then using the sky. And when I did that, I found these amazing locations, but it just doesn't work for the direction that I need to shoot. In order for me to get the right shot, I would have had to shoot a little bit more facing the left of this shot, and to the left is not all that interesting. So I kept moving on, I kept moving and looking for more options. So then I get to this place here, let's see, no, this place here. There we go. So I get to this place and I'll show you, this one was looking a little bit better. So there we go. So I like this idea because I had, a platform here where I could put the model, and then I had the backdrop, which was really interesting. But notice that now, in order to get that backdrop, the light is going to have to come directly from the right-hand side of the model. And so I'm going to get a 100% cross-lit situation where it's going to be one side of the face is going to be bright, the other side of the face is going to be dark, and so I'm just going to be battling that the whole time. So this is not necessarily the perfect place to shoot at noon or at 2 o'clock. Probably a better place to shoot in the morning or in the late evening, but I wanted to show you something right in the middle of the day. So we don't choose this location. And so it's really important to recognize how important scouting is to actual lighting conditions, because in order for you to get the perfect light, you have to be in the proper place so that you can point the proper direction so that you can get the proper light. Okay, so in the end, we ended up here, really high up in the mountains, and we ended up here, and I'm going to show you some of these images now. So this is where we ended up at the end, and we found some pretty interesting locations, and that's where we're going to go. So in this instance, I had the ability, because I knew that at this point I would have the sun in the right place, and I would be able to photograph in the right direction. And in this instance, because the rocks kind of come out and then they go back and then they come out, there's like little peninsulas, I could turn around and I could shoot the model with the light cross-lighting her, and then I could turn around and I could shoot the model with the light behind her, and no matter where I looked, I would get interesting imagery. And so that's where I wanted to be for my location, rather than a place where I could only be in one direction, and that direction was difficult because the lighting was always cross-lighting him or whatever. And so we chose this location. So it's important for you to choose the right location based on location scouting. And a lot of people email me, hey, where's this location? Where's that location? You really got to go find your own locations. You got to go look. You got to go spend some time out there and get used to understanding, where the light's going to be and all that kind of stuff. Now, just for those of you who are curious about what we're doing here, basically I take my cell phone with me wherever I go, and I'll take a bunch of pictures with my camera, but then I'll also take a picture with the cell phone. The cell phone, when I bring it in, Lightroom will automatically see where that photo was taken based on the GPS data location on the phone. And then all I have to do is drag any of the raw images that I took in that location. I can simply drag those images. I'll go back to the map here. I can simply drag an image that was shot in that location. So if this image here was shot in this location, all I have to do is grab the image that was shot there. So if I grab this image and drag it onto that specific pin, and it adds that to that location. And so it's very easy to, as long as you just take a picture with your phone anytime you move from one position to another, then you'll be able to find all the images from your camera and tag them as that location. So that way you don't necessarily need a GPS location on your camera because you have it on your phone. So that's how we do that. All right, so now we've got our location scout done, and so we got our model, Samantha Cooch, Kazuch. She's our model, and so she was fantastic, and we have our crew, and so we're on our way to the location. So what we want to do is we want to play for you the first of a couple shots that we're going to show you today, and in this one we're going to start with a softbox, but we're going to show you how we set up the shot and then how we add the light to kind of augment that lighting condition. So let's roll that first clip. The first thing that we have to do when we're out here in the bright sunlight is we have to get the sun under control. We have to figure out what that exposure is going to be. So the first thing we're going to do is take a shot of Sam and find out what the exposure is on her. We're going to make sure that the crest of light on her shoulder and the crest of light up on her head are not blowing out. So we find out what the exposure for that is and see if we can manage it without any kind of flash. If we can, great. If we can't, then we will augment and add more light later. All right, we are on the top of a cliff here and we're getting a running shot with our model Sam. And what you'll notice that I've done is we've turned her away from the sun because the sun is our worst light source. It's the harshest light source because it's such a tiny pin light in the sky. And so it's always going to be, or at least as much as possible, it's going to be our backlight, and that's going to create the hair light. So when you look at Sam right now, she's got a nice soft light hitting her from the front, which is this open sky, and then on the edges of her shoulders and on her hair and on her hands and along her hip, she's got a crest of light, and all that's coming from the sun. And so if you take a look at the whole sky here, we've got the sun not quite right behind her, but just off to the right of her just a little bit. And so most of the crest of light is over on the right-hand side there, and then the left has a little crest of light, but not quite as much. So we're going to take a shot here and show you what we get. Now, if I don't have any light whatsoever with me, the first thing I'm going to do is turn Sam away from the sun, so that I get her entire face in her own shadow. Once I've got her face in her own shadow, then that's a nice soft light. And if I have to allow a little bit of her hair to blow out or a little bit of her arm to blow out as a crest, that's just going to be the cost of doing business without a flash or without some kind of a reflector. But in this case, we're going to take a shot of her. Good. The shot looks okay, but she's pretty dark, and I'm going to have to do a little bit of manipulation inside of Lightroom in order to bring the shadows back up and take the highlights down so that she's fairly evenly lit. And it'll look nice, but not quite as nice as it could look if we did something a little bit better with it. So now we're going to add a flash. So we've got Andrew over here, and Andrew is holding onto the RFI Profoto Softbox. It's a smaller one, it's 2x3. And it's on the B1 head. So I'm going to fire up my air remote, and I've got it on TTL right now, so it's going to make its own determination as to what the light should be in order to match the background light source. So we're going to take a shot and see what it comes up with. It's just going to make its own determination based on the lighting that it sees. Beautiful. So now what we've got is we've got Sam lit by our Profoto B1 head, and that's giving her a lot more light. But there's something important about the way we've lit her, and that is that we're lighting her from the same side as the natural light source. A lot of people make the mistake of having a light source off to, say, the right-hand side here like it is on Sam, and you got most of the light over here and very little of the light on that side of her. And so they, in order to combat that, because they see a crest of light over here and a crest of light over here, they'll take the flash and they'll move it onto this side of the subject in order to fill the light in. And so they'll fill light from this side. And what happens is the natural light is naturally coming from this way. And so her hair and her head and her shoulders all have a crest of light on this side. And if you look at her face, this side of her face has a natural light on this side, and it's darker over here. And if you combat that, if you fight it and you take this light source and put it on that side of her, what happens is the eye or the brain will find the two, the background and the foreground, out of sync with each other. And so you may not understand why you don't like the shot, but you'll see her popping out of the shot. It'll almost look like she's green screened in, like she doesn't belong there. And that's simply because your mind sees the light source coming from this side and making the crest of light in the background and on her shoulder in a different way than your light source over here is creating light to fill. And so instead, what you want to do is you want to take your light source, your main light source, which is the sun, that's your ambient light source, and you want to mimic it. You want to follow the light source around. So if the light's mostly coming from this side and we've got natural crests of light on this side, less on that side, and we have more light on this side of our face, less on the other side, we're going to take this flash and we're going to start wrapping from where the light ends here on the natural side, and we're going to move it around her face like this so that we have a nice soft light continuing from the hard light. So the hard light, you get your cue from the hard light, follow the hard light and wrap the soft light around the front. That's how we make a very natural lit portrait that doesn't necessarily feel like it was flashed, but it was. So let's go and take a shot. But now we want to take it a step further. We want to negate the flash a little bit, turn it down. So I'm going to go into the flash compensation settings and I'm going to dial it down about 2/3 of a stop. That way that light doesn't look quite as harsh against Sam, so that it matches the light that's already on her. So we're going to take another shot. Here we go, Sam. Excellent. Beautiful. And so the flash is almost perfect. You can see the light kind of wrapping around her, but Andrew, I'm going to have you move in just a little closer to her. There you go. And then what I want you to do, Andrew, is I want you to take that softbox and I want you to tilt it 45 degrees to the left. So what I've done is I've just rotated the softbox just a little bit. So one corner of the softbox is going to kind of wrap around her nose just a little bit more, because I want a little bit more light coming over to the left side of her face as opposed to all of it being on the right side. There was a little bit of that kind of Rembrandt lighting going on originally, but we want to just push it a little bit over to the left. So just a corner of the softbox is going to do the trick. So here we go, Sam. Beautiful. So that just gave her a little bit more light on that side of her face. And I think that's great. Okay, so if you look at, let's go to the computer here. I want to show you the difference between the two shots when we tilted that softbox just a little bit over to the left. What we did, in effect, is we created a little softer shadow on her nose. So between the two of these, you can see on the left one over here that the shadow on her nose is just a little bit harsher, a little bit deeper. And then by simply tilting that over and getting a little corner of the softbox to sneak around that side of her nose, we got a softer look on that shadow on her nose. And so you can utilize just a piece, a corner of that softbox to help sneak the light around. Because again, what you're doing is you're taking the hard light and you're mimicking the hard light and following it around with soft light. And by tilting that, we were able to just get a little bit more light to sneak around. The other thing that was important that was mentioned inside of the video was that when we were adjusting for the TTL, because remember the TTL was determining the flash. It was, and it's pretty hard to fool the TTL on these B1s, but it was determining what the flash output should be for that given shot. And when I determined that it needed to be a little bit lower so that it wasn't quite as bright, I had to turn it down. But you don't turn it down with the Air remote. The Air remote is for, the TTL adjustments on the Air remote are specifically, and I'll show you those right now, these here, group A, B, and C, you can turn those up and down all day long in TTL, and it's not really going to do a lot, or it's not going to do anything, because those are for ratios between A, B, and C. So if you are just working on one specific head, like we were doing, we only had one head with us that day, what you're going to do to change your power and relationship to the TTL settings, or what the TTL wants to do, is you're actually going to use inside of your camera, you're going to use your flash compensation, which is right here. And the flash compensation is where you're going to dial up and down the power, the total power of the flash. And so if you're only using one head, then you have to, this is the only thing that's going to be valuable to you. So it's talking to the flash compensation inside of your camera, and then that tells the remote to then tell the flash what to do with its power. If you go into manual mode here, then once you're in manual mode and you just simply do that, here, zoom in on this so that we can, so zoom on in. There we go. So the manual, this button right here will sync you, go back and forth between TTL and then manual. Once you're in manual, then of course you can increase and decrease the power of the flash, and it's going to be doing that on the flash head itself. But when you're in TTL, if you're only dealing with one head, then you don't do it here, you do it inside of the camera itself. And of course, this is on Canon. Now, be sure to ask questions if you have any in the chat window. So go ahead and ask your questions, because we'd certainly be happy to take questions. Let me just make sure I'm looking here to see if there's any questions coming in at the moment. Okay, yeah, we do have a couple questions. So I'm going to take a couple questions right now. Let's see, we've got, the first question is, what's the best way to integrate the Canon 600 EX-RT with the B1 to lighten up the loads, say using the Canon for hair light? So the answer to that is, so basically what you want to do is you want to take, you've got two flashes with you. So if you connect the air remote or AirSync to the Canon 600EX and then set it to manual mode, the same basically set them on the same channel as the air trigger on the camera. So basically you're going to trigger them, you're going to trigger one manually, and then the other one can be TTL. The other thing that I've done is I've used this as the trigger for my main Profoto heads, and then when I have another head that I want to stick behind something or whatever, then I can actually use just a slave eye. And once I have a slave eye, then any flash whatsoever can get the trigger from here, and then it will go off and flash in manual mode as well. So there's a lot of different permutations on how you might be able to put them all together. Let's see, what's the next one here? When will the Nikon TT1 be available? That looks like it's during 2014. But keep in mind that Nikon can still use the B1 heads, you're just going to do it in manual mode. So you can certainly use the B1 heads on Nikon. You can use the remotes, but it's just going to be a manual pop. It's just not going to run the TTL. So you can get them, work on them, play with them in manual mode, which in most cases I'm going to use manual mode anyway. The TTL is great, but I love being able to set it in a manual mode and then just shoot. So let's see, what else do we have here? What ND filters am I using? 0.6, 0.9. This is a 0.9. I don't see a point in having a lighter ND filter because anytime I want to use an ND filter, I'm trying to cut a lot of light down. I'm trying to take it way down. So I don't have ND filters that are anything less than 0.9. So that's the ND filter that I'm using. Let's see. The umbrella Deep XL is shown with a tripod adapter on the Profoto website. Is the adapter needed with the D1 or the B1? No, there's an integrated umbrella holder on both the B1 and the D1, and so you can use it on either or with either. how well does the B1 work with modifiers? The light looks like it shoots out of the cannon, no spread whatsoever. So this works great with pretty much any modifier I've used on it. It works great. It is different because the light. What the question is this is kind of integrated into. So this is a piece of glass here, and then the light is behind that piece of glass, and so it spreads this way, but it doesn't stick out, which I love because I'm in places where I constantly will bust a lamp or whatever because I'm moving it around, it's out in the rocks, it's whatever. So I prefer this because it's very secure. And it works well enough on any of I haven't seen a modifier that it hasn't worked well on. It's just a little different. So you'll have to just by trial and error play with it and see the difference between having the light source inside of the head versus sticking out of the head. When it sticks out of the head, it just gives it, you get light coming actually behind behind the unit if it's if it's a bare head situation. But I like this because it's more like an off-camera flash, and that's what it is. It's an off-camera flash. So this is like a really, really, really big speed light, a really hefty, awesome speed light. And so it's manufactured that way as well, so that my assistant could literally hold this bareheaded as well, not necessarily needing a light modifier for it. So it's a really rugged piece as well. Okay, so now let's go back to our computer here for a second, and I wanted to just zoom in and show you the difference between two of these shots. So this is our original shot, and then so this is the final shot and the original shot side by side, and I just wanted to zoom in and show you the difference in the eyes, and that's what's important, because I thought, well, from a distance, the shot with no flash actually looked pretty okay. It looks nice. So someone might look at it and say, well, why do I need a flash? But if you zoom in and look at the eyes, there's just no comparison between the two. And of course the face has some nice sculpting to it. It gives it some volume. So there's a lot of value to having a light off to the right there and wrapping it around. But I just wanted to zoom in and make sure that you saw the difference between her eyes on the lit shot versus her eyes on the naturally lit shot. I much prefer the one to the right, and I would imagine most people do. So, all right. The next thing that we're going to do is add a beauty dish onto this. So let's play the second video, and we're gonna add a beauty dish and see how that differs in the way that we shoot the shot. Okay, so the softbox is a fantastic way to get beautiful light, even in outdoors, especially with a B1 head that allows you to go anywhere without a cord and no batteries and all that kind of stuff. But occasionally you run into wind problems because this is like a giant sail. And so if the wind hits that, it could blow your assistant off the cliff. And I've actually shot many times in the Grand Canyon where my assistant literally was not just 4 feet down, but he was 1,000 feet down to his death if he blew over with this. So we don't want a big sail in those cases. So instead, a beauty dish does a great job at spreading the light, because we all know that the light source is more beautiful and softer when you get it bigger. The bigger it is, the softer it looks, the better it looks. So I'm going to put on a beauty dish and show you the difference between these shots with a softbox and a beauty dish. Beauty dish will do a great job at spreading that light and making it look beautiful, but you won't blow off the cliff. So now we have the beauty dish on, and it acts a little less like a sail. So now my assistant's not going to fly over the canyon wall. So we're gonna see how that looks. We're going to take this softbox, put it somewhere where it won't blow away. So notice that the beauty dish has to be a little bit closer because I still want it to be fairly large in comparison to my subject. And I also have swung it around her face a little bit more so that it reaches a little bit around the left side of her nose. The softbox being bigger was able to wrap a little easier. So now we're bringing that the entire post closer to her and leaning it over to the left there so that it can reach around her face. Andrew, you're gonna have to lean it out just a little bit. Can't let it be in my shot. And there we go. Again, it was on TTL, and so the beauty dish is acting to make the light source bigger, and the head is doing the calculation between the camera and the head as to what the light should be. If I need to lower that down, and of course it's a little bit brighter than I would like it to be, just turn on the flash compensation and lower it down just to 2/3 a stop. Excellent. Much better. I like that a lot. Okay. Sam, need you to... Let's stop that tape and let's talk about that. So you see what happened when we worked with the beauty dish, because it wasn't as close and it wasn't as big, we had to then take it further to the center of her. So we could use the softbox off to the side quite a bit and get a nice soft wrap around her. But when we use the beauty dish, we need to bring it closer to the camera and closer to the other side of her face so that it can wrap around her face still, because it is a smaller light source. So you just have to keep in mind, as you make those light sources smaller, you need to start moving them closer to the camera or around the other side of her face. So you still want to keep some direction of light over to the right hand side so that it kind of follows that natural wrap. But the bigger the light source is, the more you can stick it off to the side, and as you make the light source smaller, you need to bring it closer over to the center, or at least the best way to think of it is just follow the nose. So, you know, make sure that it's closer to the nose, so that it can reach around the nose, because that's where you get the ugliest shadow, is on that nose. So we had a couple other questions here as well, so I wanted to answer those. So one of the questions here is, and I love this question, is high-speed sync for Canon coming? Like, what's the deal there? And the answer is yes, but there's no confirmed date. So yes, you will be able to use the B1 head on high-speed sync for Canon. Just don't know when that's going to be, and then you'll just have to use a firmware update in order to upgrade your, it looks like the TTL Air Remote will be able to upgrade to that firmware. So it's coming, and that's great news. I didn't even know that, so I'm excited about that. So, and then also the other question was, you know, if you were using several, say you were using two B1 heads, and you wanted one of them to be manual and one of them to be TTL, so that you could operate on the fly, but you had one that would always be you know, constantly lit the same. Like, for instance, when I'm shooting weddings, I want the front light to be TTL, but I want the rear light to actually be manual, so it's always pumping the same amount of light no matter what happens, so that I don't get any changes in light. Although with the B1s, I've found that it's pretty hard to fool them, so a lot of times you can leave them all in TTL. However, if you want to do manual and TTL at the same time, you just simply have to choose different groups. So A, B, and C are TTL groups, and then D, E, and F are manual groups. And so as long as you just use the groups and put them in their respective groups, then you can have a manual flash and TTL all operating off of the Air Remote. So that's the way you would solve that. So the next video I want to play, which is, because we're getting close on time, is I want to play a short piece of another video. So we're gonna speed ahead, Matt, to the portion where we're on the cliff, and where we're actually kind of working with the TTL and then turning it into manual. And so that is the I think that's number 3. Yeah, so that's number 3. So we're going to go to 6 minutes on number 3 and start playing that one. And in this clip, you're going to see me working with the remote. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to start with TTL, and we get the shot, and we like the way the shot is, and then after that, we can turn it to manual, and we can kind of maneuver that. And actually, Matt, instead of going there, there's a better version of it on the fast setup on number 5. And what you'll notice that I do is I'm going to get a TTL reading on it, and then I'm going to turn it to manual so that it doesn't change based on my position to the sun. Because when you've got your camera and you're facing directly into the sun, if you move a little bit and you know, put the model in different positions, then she will become, you know, block a little bit of the sun, and so your TTL is going to constantly be shifting and changing based on how much light it sees is necessary to match the sun. And so, so we want to make sure that we turn it to manual after we get the perfect amount of light. The TTL can give that to us really quickly, and then we'll go to manual. So let's roll that. That sun's going to drop on us really fast. So what we're doing is we're doing as fast as we can. We're going to be setting up a shot with the softbox. So the softbox is going to be our portrait light. I want you to just hike that thing up a lot. Yeah, just so that I get lots of wrinkles off of that dress. Okay? Yes, just like that. Perfect. Okay, so I want the sun in the shot. The sun's giving me this beautiful hair light. Kind of mess your hair up a little bit. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so she's gonna mess up her hair. We're gonna go into full TTL and let this thing light her. We're gonna start with no flash compensation whatsoever. But before we even start there, we're gonna get an ambient exposure. Beautiful. Okay, so now we're gonna set her up against the sky. So we're gonna have a dark background here. So we just want the sky, and then we want her. And this softbox is going to be what lights her. Bring the softbox up here, and we're gonna tilt it down just a little bit. So it comes down on her, good. And then bring it up as high as you can, right there. There you go, good. And we turn it on, add some TTL to it. That's pretty good. Not quite what we want because that's the sun is fooling it. So we're gonna increase the flash compensation by a full stop. And that's exactly what we want. So at this point, we don't want it getting fooled as we move around. So we're gonna turn it to manual, and that holds that setting. And now I can do whatever I want, and I can shoot however I want, and it doesn't matter what I'm getting. Look up at the light. And now the TTL is not being fooled by changing conditions, because now it's completely manual. You can see that it doesn't matter what I'm shooting and whether I'm going horizontal or vertical. So I'm going to reset myself. You stay where you are. Okay. No matter what, I'm getting the same reset lighting. Ambient exposure so that I get a little bit of this soft background here. TTL is going to stay exactly as it is. And this time just look right at the light. So no matter what you do after you've turned it to manual, then you've got a constant light that doesn't change. So let's turn that off. And here, so I had a question that came in about where is the TTL settings. So if you look here on the flash itself, I mean on the air remote. So on the air remote, we've got the screen here, and on the left-hand side, the top is the mode, whether it's manual or TTL, and it's that top right-hand button that changes it from TTL to manual. So if you're in TTL and you're firing, that's actually going to, and I'm gonna put both of these on screen at the same time here. So if I'm in TTL, it is actually determining the actual power of this flash. But then once it gives that specific power to the flash and you like it, then you simply click on this button and turn it to manual, and from then on out, it's just going to send a fire signal to here, and it's not going to change the power. And then if for some reason you want to increase or decrease that power, assuming that you have this on the A1, so this is in group A, so I'm looking at group A here, and I can simply just increase, and you can see how it's changing the power. And if I want it to power up by an entire full stop, instead of just pushing it once like that, I will hold it down and it will increase by one full stop. And if I just do little clicks, it's going to increase by 1/10. So that's how you do it. So it's very, very simple to take the B1 head and allow it to do a TTL situation, get the setting the way you want it very quickly, because it's very hard to fool the B1 with the TTL on. And then once you've got that, just mess around with it a little bit, and then you've got your turn it to manual, and you've got your shot. Then you can recompose and move around, and the changing light conditions are not going to fool the actual flash. So that's the way I prefer to work. It's very fast to work that way, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. Another question that came in was, would you use a polarizing filter when I'm doing a landscape with people, as well as maybe instead of a neutral density? That's an interesting idea. It would help to draw the sky in a little bit more. So it's worth a try. I have a polarizing filter that I use on occasion. But I don't really like using polarizers all that much, because they do some wonky things occasionally that I don't prefer. So, certainly you could, and that would help cut down the light a little bit as well, and give you the ability to change, what the sky looks like. But it also might change the way her dress looks at the same time. So that's something to be aware of. The other question that we had, and go to the computer for a second, because I want to show you one of the final shots that we've got here, and that is this really dramatic shot. And I'm just going to go, there we go. So there's our dramatic shot. And the question was, how far away is the photographer from the model? Because I'm using a long lens, and yet I'm getting a really wide area. So I'm using a 70 to 200, but a lot of the times I'm still at 70. 70 is still fairly wide. And if you're far enough away from the model, and so I would say that I was maybe 30 to 40 feet away from the model. So she's on one cliff and I'm on another cliff. But it's important to recognize that these cliffs are not cliffs with 1,000 feet drop. So she's not at a cliff that's going to drop 1,000 feet, even though it looks like it's a long way down. She's on a cliff that drops down about 5 feet, and then there's a platform, and then there's a cliff that drops a long way. And so she's still fairly well protected. Like if she jumped down, she could just jump down. But notice that I crop such that it looks like it's a little bit more dramatic. But really, if you go down an extra inch or two from where the bottom crop is, you would see that it's there's another landing there. So we're just we're faking it. So what metering mode is the camera on when using TTL on the B1? My preference is to always put the camera into the matrix metering mode. So that's the mode that's metering everything and then doing a little calculation. So it's not just a general metering mode like the old school metering mode, and it's not a spot metering mode. It's a matrix metering. It's actually determining in the camera based on what it knows about what the light could be doing. And so it's just a more intelligent metering system. So I like the matrix metering. I'm comfortable with it, and I know how it gets fooled. And so because I've lived with it for so long and I've become comfortable with it, that's the metering mode that I prefer. I don't prefer a spot metering mode when I'm dealing with flash and TTL, because it really depends on where that spot is. And so if I shift a little bit, I end up totally fooling the TTL, because I end up on a black piece of shirt, or I end up on the sun gets into it or whatever. So it really can fool it. But the matrix allows it to be a lot less volatile when it comes to metering. So that's my preference on that. Let's see if we have time for one more question here. Oh, this is a good question. What happens when the sun is overhead rather than the situation you're describing where you can position your subject relative to the angle of the sun? I don't know of a time in my life where the sun has been directly overhead, but I've never been on the equator. That's the only place where the sun is directly overhead at any point. Anywhere else on the earth, the sun is always going to be a little bit in the north or a little bit in the south. So for us, the sun is always a little bit to the south, and so it traverses the southern sky. It doesn't go overhead like this. It traverses even during the summer, the sun is south a little bit. It's just higher in the southern sky. And so you always have the ability to face your model north if the sun is in the southern sky. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, then you could face your model south, and the sun would be in the northern sky. If you're in the equator, where it literally is over the top of your head, then you just wait until 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And then suddenly you've got a little bit of an angle to that sun. And so there's really very, very few instances where you have to shoot at high noon on the equator where the sun is barreling straight down. Usually you can find a way to get that sun just at a slight angle, and you don't necessarily need to shoot at high noon during that situation. So that would be my advice. Just always look for an opportunity to shoot. I mean, really, we shot this. We shot these images at 2 o'clock in the bright sunlight because it was harsh and it was hard to do, and we wanted to show that it was easy to combat that, which it was with one flash. But with that, you have to understand that I wouldn't shoot that way normally. I would normally go to, say, 4 o'clock, and that would be much sweeter light. And of course, the shot that we're looking at here on the screen itself, so this shot is actually shot at 6 o'clock or 5:30 or something like that. So it's later in the evening, and so this is when we got our really nice sweet light. And so we've got the sun coming in off of sunset, and then we have our assistant with the telezoom reflectors way off to the left here, and it's shooting over the chasm to light her, but it's wrapping the light in a very natural way still. And so with one flash we were able to equalize the light, make it look nice and soft, but we had softer light to deal with too. So it's always easier to work in the evening or in the morning, but as you can see, we've done some pretty good stuff at 2 p.m. in the hottest, brightest part of the day here in Phoenix. So that is all the time we have for today. If you have any questions or if you want to contact me, you can reach me on Twitter. You can follow me there at Jared Platt. You can find me on Facebook with Jared Platt is my handle on Facebook. I have jaredplatt.com is where you can follow me on my blog and sign up for newsletters. I want to make sure that we send out a good thank you to Tether Tools and also to Triple Scoop Music. All of the music that you've been hearing as we've come in to this webinar and as we leave is all Triple Scoop Music. Please make sure that you're purchasing licenses for the music that you use in your professional career. That's important. And of course, we want to thank Profoto for making amazing lighting gear. It's just fantastic to have stuff like this. These B1 off-camera flashes are light, they're simple to use, they're powerful enough. You know, I used to use speed lights for everything because they were portable and I could use a flash, but they're just not as powerful, and so it's you have to have 5 of them to equal the power of one B1 head. So it's a no-brainer to take this guy on location, and especially as high-speed sync for Canon comes about, then it will be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to the high-speed sync era, but until then, I still There's just no comparison. So thank you, Profoto, for making great gear. Thanks everyone for showing up and for listening, and please feel free to contact me, and we will see you in May.